On to the action items. First action item is the Luckett's Elementary wastewater treatment plant service agreement by Kinsey Downs and Kinsey.
Good morning.
Morning. Good
Good
morning.
morning, Chair, Committee members, board members. As always, fantastic to be here. As we pull up the item, I just want to share with you some items to think about. I may repeat myself a couple times, but I think they're important. The first one, this topic was back in front of this committee back in 2023. It was May, and we are on the same journey we were back then, right? Trying to work towards an agreement and ownership of this service area. Additionally, the agreement was attached to the item. So if you had opportunity to see it, happy to ask questions or discuss it. Legal has reviewed the agreement and been a part of the entire process. And finally, Loudoun County and Loudoun County Public Schools has taken steps to pre-approve their signatory process. So once we kind of meet what we need from our groups, we should see them executed in a fairly timely fashion. All right, so what are we talking about and where are we? So up in Luckett's, there's an existing wastewater treatment plant that is on the LCPS or Loudoun County Public Schools property. It is highlighted by the red star in the graphic, and it serves 4 parcels: the elementary school, the community center to the north, number 2, the Luckett's Volunteer Fire Station, number 3, and the professional fire station, which I will refer to as Company 10. This system was new. It replaced the older system. It was built in 2022, and it's an MBR. It's a very advanced treatment technology, and it's very robust. LCPS kind of had a goal to have a 50-year solution, and generally, I think they met it, right? It's really good, and it's really robust. Loudoun Water has been the contract operator out there since 2014 for schools, and we have commissioned the MBR plant for them. So we know the site, we know the system, we know the components, and we know the regulatory drivers. Just for reference, bullets 2 and 4, the community center as well as fire station 10, we do provide contract operations there for the water systems to the county. So the background why we're here today is that when we transitioned the Luckett's Volunteer Station to the permanent, that became a private entity connected to the school system. And generally speaking, the school system is not in the wastewater business, so they had a hard time setting rates. So they requested that the volunteer station disconnect from the system. Naturally, I believe we all can agree that would have left them without a true solution. So there was a board of supervisors, board member initiative to direct staff to find a solution for the volunteer station. They looked at a lot of stuff, but the most easiest convenient one is to keep them on the system. If that happened, it'd probably have to transfer to Loudoun Water, mainly due to our mission, right? We serve in unincorporated areas of Loudoun County, as long as it meets some of our requirements accepting new systems. So we actually moved forward and did a due diligence effort, kind of reviewing the facility, reviewing our, requirements and capturing them for all to understand as we move forward. So what did we find? Generally, our Loudoun Water Board policies require that the facility must be built, constructed, and conveyed to Loudoun Water at no cost to us, and that the applicant must pay the revenue equalization fee. From a physical component standpoint, we do need to do a couple of process upgrades at the site to meet kind of some of the flow tiers identified in the permit. And we also need to upgrade security components and communication services. Naturally, I think LCPS's approach to security isn't the same as ours. That makes sense. We also identified that there's a permit and legislative process to kind of define and transfer the service area. We identified our easement needs, and we talked about each connection going through the new customer process. We want to make sure they get into our system. Here we go to the advance.
I do have one question about
Yeah.
the revenue equalization fee, which we could talk about later in the presentation or now, depending
Up
on
to you.
what, help me is that like a discounted cash flow where we're taking some data out in the future and kind of working it back, or how are we getting to that number?
So small systems are very costly to operate, and the revenue generated by connections does not usually cover that. So the REF is that subsidy to cover that gap on a 40-year maintenance as well as capital replacement cost.
Okay. So we're just calculating 40 years out what we think it'll cost to run it, and then
Correct.
and then we see how much we're missing from, and okay.
And that's how we define it. And traditionally on I guess, this is unique, right? We agree this is unique. But on like, say, residential ones, it's applied per connection. So we expect that payment when they fully connect. And this one would be probably paid in full at the time of the agreement or
Okay.
as defined by the agreement.
And just a quick note, this originated when we went to the one rate for the smaller systems. So that's then this concept, 10 years ago, whatever that was.
Okay.
A question, the old fire station, you said the school is taking that over. What's it being used for? You know?
The volunteer fire station is still owned by the volunteers.
Okay.
So the school has, generally, there's been an extension of that requirement to disconnect until we work out maybe some of these minor details to keep them on the system and convert the system to Loudon Water.
They're gonna maintain it as a fire station still? or-
I don't think the volunteers have said, they kind of like it as a kind of a quasi community center. They felt it kind of filled a need out there in addition to the other community center.
Okay.
So generally speaking, all that information fed forward into an agreement. That agreement is between three parties, Loudon Water, Loudon County, as well as Loudon County Public Schools. I would like to see it captured the history, our current state, and our next steps to actually convey and define the system. It's really a great like path forward document. It was reviewed by all the legal parties and it was thoroughly vetted. Just to kind of identify some of the steps that were noted is that, we need to get the special exception and commission permit. We need to, we defined and we actually need payment for the revenue equalization fee. We need to grant easements and convey the facilities through those easements. And we need to transfer the VIPDs permit, which is the DEQ requirement of discharge. Each connection needs to go through the new customer process, and we need to perform those design and construction upgrades. Naturally, just defining that really doesn't have it unless there's an owner of each thing. So we took the time to identify who's the champion and the process. So when it comes to execution agreement, naturally all parties are going to be a part of that. Special exception and commission permit approval is led by Loudoun County, specifically General Services, with support from Loudon Water and LCPS. They have been in that process since probably the fourth quarter of last year, and we expect to maybe see it go to that public hearing / board process this spring. We expect the ref payment. We believe right now that the county will pay the entire fee for all parties, and that number is $5.1 million. We expect granting of easements and conveying of facilities. All parties are important to this. However, Loudoun County is taking the lead in developing the plats for everybody. They will use Loudon Water's deed language. New customer process is required by all the connections. We believe the volunteer fire station will be handled by Loudoun County, and they will follow our standard rates, rules, and regs on how they get connected. Design and construction of the upgrades of the plant that are required are going to be championed by Loudon Water, reimbursed by Loudoun County. Right now, the agreement includes about $600K. That does have some kind of language that if we exceed that, we can go back for more. And finally, we want to see everybody complete the agreement. So there's some kind of closeout features when we get there. This is a graphic showing the proposed easements. Please note that all wastewater facilities, the trunk sewer, as well as the treatment plant is all on the school property. The other connections will be considered private laterals that Loudoun County will work to get easements for those. It's a side project, does not affect us. So we're going to have a primary trunk sewer, sanitary sewer easement down the middle of the property as you see there in gray. The wastewater treatment facility easement is the blue/purple box. We request a little additional area for maybe room to grow in the future if anything shall come up. And we also need to get an access easement on the park parcel to the south that is the gravel access road for the ball fields. I believe it's also used for the schools, possibly their bus loop. And finally, like some additional notes, I just kind of want to reinforce to the committee. These actions follow Loudon Water's developer process. It is outlined in all of our guidance documents, so it's really no different or unique. The gatekeeper to all this is divine the service area through the commission permit. We really can't set rules, regs. We can't set, rates until that is done. And that kind of makes sense, right? Because there's no service area. The rest of it, we believe, could be quasi-flexible and the order doesn't really matter. User rates will align with their policies and be our central system standard rate. And all parties have taken steps to kind of pre-approve the agreement. Board of Supervisors kind of agreed to this on 1/7, and LCPS believes that their executives can sign this without board approval. In front of you is the motion, and I'm happy to address any questions.
Can I raise some questions, Chair?
Yeah, please.
First off, well, thank you very much for the overview, and the staff materials describing the whole situation were excellent. I would say, I think I should say, I am proud to have a member of my immediate family be a member of Company 10. And I feel like I could participate in these discussions and have no business connection to Company 10 other than have a volunteer that participates in the system. The revenue equalization fee, it looked like in the materials, the county was covering that for the privately owned piece of property. Is that accurate?
We believe so. There's a side agreement that they've either are working on or executing, and they're helping the volunteers get to a more comfortable space. They had realized that I think there's a lot of maybe not a lot of resources.
Okay, and then is that amount included in the 5,100,000?
It is. That is the
Okay,
total ref. It's actually broken out where the school has the majority of that. I don't have the number, but probably something around 70%, and the rest is spread across the other three connections.
okay. And then I guess my last question or area of questioning is the service area. When you look at the map, you see a lot more of Luckett's than just these 4 properties. And I don't know myself individually, but I would bet at least some of them are service constrained when it comes to water and sewer. So the planning end of the equation, which would be planning for service area, planning for utility service, is covered from the county's perspective in the special exception and commission permit. Should it be larger, or should it need to be larger in the future? What is the position of Loudon Water? How would you deal with that? And start all over again, but you really can't start all over again if you don't have the capacity to serve larger areas. Is the capacity based on just the usage and flow from the 4 properties? And if it is, that's an awful lot of money to spend for just those 4 properties. So I think Mr. Peterson might have something to say about it. I know I've talked to him over the years about it, but I would just raise that as sort of an area of question.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'll start. It's a great question, and it's the question that we have asked in just about every meeting we've been in to make sure that, starting at the county staff level, they're thinking of it. We've pointed this out, that ultimately, historically here, what's interesting is there was never a service area established at all, which surprised some of the county staff. It's just been an area that's serving these 4 properties that, because they were county facilities in the schools, it just was a service area was never established. So that needed to happen regardless. So we kept asking, is it just for these properties that are already being served, or is it broader? And that is a question for the county to answer. And what we have continually heard is that the guidance was just for these properties. Now, in the current process, I think we're assuming that this is continuing to be looked at by the county staff, and but from everything I believe we're hearing, the continued moving forward is for those properties being served. To get to your question around, what would this look like? This particular operation is designed and set for these properties. There would be significant capital upgrades if properties were added to this, and that, all of that would have to be figured out. Those, this is what we continually get into, the back and forth. That capital cost would be covered by those properties, which is always a challenge, whether they are some of the residential. I think there's kind of a mobile home park, up in there, but there's other properties. And so these would be the challenges, but there's not a conversation where we've gotten into those details, because everything we've continued to hear from feedback is that it's continuing to stay with these properties at this point.
Okay. And I appreciate that. And I think that's a very accurate description of how it works. I would just say to my colleagues here that maybe sometimes we have to communicate to the county that we do have our eyes on this, and maybe their view of what comes across as sort of a narrow, short range needs to be adjusted for the long haul, because really every place where we go to serve is based on the answer coming from the county direction first. This one, it sort of looks like, wait a minute, it should probably be bigger. It will likely need to be bigger in the future. And so if we keep operating with the same model, we're waiting for them to tell us where service occurs. So, I think we all get it, but at some point, we need to do something different,
It's a good
my
point.
opinion.
Charles, I had a similar question. So the capacity today, or what will be, we're talking about today, is sized just for those properties,
Correct.
nothing else. There's nothing else built in for expansion and so forth. If there were in the future a need to expand and we agreed to do that, is it possible? Is there property there to do that?
I would think this qualifies for the water wastewater program, right? People outside the service district could go through that program and we could identify the upgrades and space and the requirements need. We do have a couple of flow tiers in the permit, but we physically can't treat it. So we do have a little bit, but the schools pick that going through their process, and I don't want to say it's arbitrary, but it's just a higher number. And so it's really not related to incorporating any known parcels to our knowledge. That's why you also asked for the little bigger footprint you saw in the easements
Yeah.
to maybe have that flexibility. We did stress through this whole process with LCPS in the county that we're looking for a working relationship. We realize that we're strained out there and that we want to make sure that we're all good partners as we kind of try to solve these bigger questions.
Water is well water.
They're all
All in well.
private wells.
I have a question.
Kinsey,
Sure. Go ahead.
can you flip back to the other map showing the easement areas?
Yeah.
Mr. Young, I just wanted to kind of further address your question because this map kind of highlights it. You can see the building there in that purple polygon. While there are barriers, as Mark described, to us being able to really assert ourselves and really strongly, petition for the future expansion of the facility, we do try to do all that we can within the bounds of our flexibility. And that was something that we pushed for very strongly in the process, was negotiating that much larger area shown in the purple polygon, because it's an easy, check the box sort of item, but we've already acquired enough space to provide a lot more future flexibility for expansion. So we felt like that was a big win-win in this project, to your very point of what might the future hold.
Thank you.
And that expanded area, that was included in the cost being paid by others? We didn't pay for that? Good. And then my other question was the $609,000 estimate for the expansion or for the improvements that are needed. When was that done?
Like 2023.
Okay, so it's probably gone up quite a bit since then.
We did have some assumptions to make sure it wasn't too tight for the, I guess, the financial climate. But we hope to revisit that when we move forward.
And we're not concerned with someone saying, hey, we agreed to 609, it's now 800, you're going to cover the rest?
Always a concern. We try to have some language in the agreement that states that we can come back to discuss that and maybe a one-time increase.
You're comfortable with that language?
We're partners with the county.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We've been able to negotiate.
I don't think it would be a problem. They're used to seeing all of the projects, the costs are skyrocketing and they're constantly coming back for more because of inflation.
Yeah,
So-
that was. In that timeframe.
Yeah, I don't think it would be a problem. I just was wondering if you guys are comfortable. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks. Charles.
I move recommendation to the board to authorize signing of the Luckett service agreement by the general manager and execute the related task outlined in the agreement.
Second.
Favor?
Uh,
This to the board for an action item.
Thank you.
the agenda here.
Hey, Sean, this is Terry. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Do you want to put that on consent or action? I didn't.
yeah, we put it on action, Terry.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't know you're on the line. Yeah, we put
Big
it on
Brother's
action.
watching.
I guess so. It's a new year, so. Yeah, thanks for the question. All right, Sally, we're on to monthly financial summary.
Hey, good morning. This
Morning.
is the first look at our 2024 draft financials. We have not gone through audit yet. We haven't finished all of our accruals, so please take these as draft. But as you can see, revenues came in at operating revenues at 182 million, which is above the forecast of 125 million. That big blue bar to the right, the other category, note that that's the 42 million. So you'd want to back that out for the easement that we got. So yeah, we'd want to back that out. Non-operating revenues totaled 116 million, which is above the year-to-date forecast of 52 million. So those are going to be these bars here, the availability fees that we got in. Expenses through December totaled 156 million, which was 10 million below the year-to-date forecast. Most of our budget numbers were pretty on. As you look at these categories, personnel was a little lower. We had some savings in our health insurance costs, as well as some of the retirement costs that were budgeted. But all of our accruals aren't done yet either. So we'll see how those change as we move through. Moving on to ERCs. For the year, we finished up at, let me turn my page here, tiny up there. 5,940, which is well above our projection, which is in the pink line here. So you can see that big spike in December. The bulk of that was due to one project that was added, and they decided to add at their full capacity that they had. So that was a little bit out of the ordinary for forecasting. So if we back out those 2,000 connections, and if we back out the 600 connections from April that were the expansion in capacity, that brings us down a little bit closer to our forecast. So I did a calculation that would have brought us in at 342 over our budget. So it doesn't look as bad as it does there in terms of our forecast.
What project was that?
It's called Project Aspen. Yeah. It's next to, from what I understand, it's next to the Trap Rock facility. And they, I don't know, someone else could probably speak a little bit more.
Confidential project?
It's a confidential project, but
Yeah.
it's on the north side of Trap Rock.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about now. Okay.
Mr. Allen?
Thank you. The $42 million, I see we're classifying as operating revenue. And I'm just wondering, since that's a one-time thing, should it be non-operating revenue? Is that the appropriate classification for that source of revenue?
Well, we just roll this other into operating.
It's a good question. I believe, Sally can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe we talked to the auditors about this and this is where they recommended we put it. I think we had the same kind of internal discussion. And so before we did anything, we did discuss this with our auditors in advance, because obviously this will be something they flag and look into when they come.
Yeah, I mean, I would just ask them for clarification. I was looking last night at leases and easements, especially for utilities, and almost all the data that I could find says it should be treated as a capital gain. And I know, that's probably not applicable to us per se, but it just made me think that it's more non-operating and operating, but obviously they know more than I do. So I just wanted to point that out. And then for the ERCs, the 20, was there, I know we're raising rates. A lot of times before a rate increase, people rush to kind of pay a little bit. If they're going to pay in January, February, they pay in December to avoid the 7%. Was there, or whatever the percentage was we did for ERCs, was there any of that in that number?
We did. So if you back out the 2,000 here from December, you'll see we had 288, which is a little bit higher. And then when you see the January numbers, you're going to see some, I don't know what to call it, lapse. So some that did come in the first week of January that we did decide to take. So it's going to hit 2025 revenue, but it really is related to 2024. So.
I believe part of the reason for the 2,000 that was discussed, they were also trying to get in advance of the rate increase as well. So,
Okay.
Because
All right, thanks.
a rate increase on 2,000 connections is substantial.
Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah.
I wouldn't want to pay that.
Yeah.
So as we look at our overtime, premises overtime, you can see that really 2024, this huge increase in data centers. So we were tracking here at 30%-ish, and then it jumped up to the 67%. And then that's obviously reflected also in our revenue. Totaling these categories up, we had 103 million in availability fees this year.
But to your other comment, we're thinking that this is sort of pulling forward ERCs from 25, 26. They're kind of just coming in now.
We did see that, but like you'll see in January too, I'll have an explaining item for the rest of the year because of my budget versus what lagged into January. So.
Yeah, because there were some, they understand the rate increase is coming, but there's quite a lengthy process on their side to get everything done. So sometimes they are attempting to get in at that December 31st date, but then it comes in January 5th.
Okay, so
And
that's what-
so there were some that were trying to hit and just because of their process, they couldn't get in time. And so theoretically, this could have been even higher, but
Okay, so
They
January
lapsed a
is a
week.
big month too. I was
It is.
mistakenly thinking that December was
Mhm.
big and January would be small, but okay. Makes sense.
Historically, you can see that's the case here.
Mhm.
So you see January numbers traditionally go back down. That will not be the case in 2025 when you see 2025.
Hey, all good problems to have here, so.
Moving on to the capital budget, again, draft for the year, because we haven't quite booked everything as of the time I did this report, but we're at 94% of our revised spending plans. So that's 120 million spent out of the 127.5 million. And then as we break it down into availability fees paying versus user fees, you can see that about 75% of this was paid with with the availability charges. So 90 million broken out by availability charges and 29 million was the user fees that paid for the construction. Any other questions on December financials? And again, we'll come back with final once we're done through audit in a couple months here.
Remind me again for when we pay TAP fees, somebody gets a project zoned and approved, but they haven't gone through site plan, they don't have a building permit or something like this. What can they apply and pay for a TAP fee whenever they want? What's the threshold where we go, all right, you can come and pay for this thing?
They have to have their construction permit in place.
Okay.
Plan approval and construction
Okay.
permit issued.
Okay, so there's still a fair number of approved data center projects that aren't to that stage yet.
Correct.
So, okay, there's
Yeah.
still
So there's,
a meaningful pipeline.
correct.
Okay, good to know.
Mm.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on financials? Okay, we're going to move on to the quarterly investment portfolio, please. Okay, this again is as of December. Our total portfolio as of December was 418.5 million. You can see the breakout there, 122 in treasuries, and then our liquidity was 138 million as of the end of the year. Market trends, our first column is as of December, so we had 419. And then if you look back, the 2 quarters, we were around 340 million. So we did have that influx of cash at the end of the year. Average yield has gone up to 3.43%. And then down at the bottom, you can see the trends for our major investment categories. And then during the quarter ended 12/31, we did have $30 million mature. 15 million of agencies was called in that quarter, so I did reinvest that also. Purchases during the quarter were 56.8 million. So most of those that were bought were U.S. Treasuries with the average yield there of 4.12. And then the LGIP average rate for the quarter was 4.72. So for this quarter, I'm already furiously investing the funds that we have. So we'll closely monitor the interest rates. I have some corporate bonds rolling off, so I'll invest those this quarter. And then we'll maintain the liquid investments to meet our immediate needs. I have invested that excess cash from the end of the year already into treasuries, so that's rolled over. Yeah. What questions can I answer on investments? Oops, sorry.
Are you thinking that our allocations for 25 will be roughly similar as it was in 24 with treasuries, short-term treasuries, corporate paper, all this stuff?
Yep, I try to keep the investment policy guidelines. We do have more liquidity than we did.
We have like it down to, okay, this in corporate paper and this in bonds and this in T-bills and.
No limit for T-bills, but for the other.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
I do try to get the municipals, we've been low on, they're hard to find. So I'm lower than the guidelines would like for that. But again, the rates for treasuries are fine. So since I don't have any limit, I've been investing in those. So.
And we've dipped our toe into commercial paper from time to time. Is that something this year we're thinking about doing?
I
More
look
of
at
that?
the rates aren't,
Yeah,
for the riskier investment, the rates aren't making sense right now. But if the rates flipped, we could do that.
the last time we purchased one, the feedback we got from the broker was they're not great. And the minimum that you could purchase was a $20 million block. And that's a little more than we normally have in one investment. We generally kind of the 5 to 10 range for one investment. So 20 million in one commercial paper didn't seem worth it for us. Yeah.
Okay.
But you're right. We kind of go in and then back out and then come back
right.
and then
The corporate
yeah.
bonds we have showing here are the 60 million. What are those?
Yep, we have the one rolling off today is New York Life Global, so I'll reinvest that. We have some Apple, we have Toyota Motor, and Johnson & Johnson. So we don't have too many of those, but see what I get today. It's kind of a novel category to invest in, so I'm excited to see what they'll come back with today when to invest.
So no Bitcoin. I don't.
No Bitcoin.
No. In fact, with this, especially they have to be AA or higher rated from both 2 agencies. So I check behind them to make sure I'm not investing in something I shouldn't be investing in. So,
Right.
yeah.
Can we go back to the financials
Mhm.
and ask questions?
Yeah.
Being a new member to the board, and can you refresh my memory? Are we on calendar budget year or fiscal year budget year? Like the county does July?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're calendar year.
Okay.
Good question.
And so it seemed like there's a lot of fund balance. What, do you know what the total is?
You mean
Or
the
approximately,
417 million, the cash?
are we that much in the plus?
Oh.
I just mean at
you have
the end of the
income
year.
Statement, Sally?
Oh,
How much extra is
increase.
left over?
Yeah. Let's see. I don't have the detail. I mean, I could pull up the detailed income.
I mean, it was,
statement.
even if it's ballpark, I mean, it was well over 100 million, right? Maybe closer to 150 or 2.
I'm trying to remember what it was. It was more this year than normal.
Yeah, and I know the 42 million really
yeah.
helped with that, but
Yeah, the 42
I
million
think it was
helped.
significantly above that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Change in net position was 162 million for December
There you go.
24.
So that's kind of the fund balance for
Yeah.
2024.
Mhm.
yeah.
And so I guess my question is, I know how the county generally does that. How does Loudon Water generally handle the fund budget? The balance, the fund balance?
So we've invested a lot of it. I try to stick by our policy and only have, the recommended percentages in each of the investments. So,
So
Do we
what-
use some of that for the CIP project?
Yeah, so what you'll see is one of the things on your plan, work plan for this year is the 5-year plan of finance, which is in March or April, I forget which one. But what that'll do, the extra fund balance from what we had anticipated from the last time we did the 5-year plan of finance would show possibly a reduction in how much money you need to borrow based on that additional fund balance that you're
And
recommending.
is there any option for us to legally use some of that money so to offset the planned increase for next year? for the
So
rates?
one of the things that we're going to do is for, not the next one, but after next year's increase is do a kind of a review of the rates. And if we continue to see an excess fund balance for capital expenses, it could result in a reduction in borrowing, which then would result in your debt service expenses, which could then result in possibly reducing that approved rate increase. We're not planning on doing that for this year,
Yeah.
but for the next year. Yeah.
And that is something you guys would be proactively looking to do without our direction?
I think during
If
the
possible, to-
December board meeting, I believe Mr. Campbell kind of directed us
Okay,
to do that. So we
Okay,
have
good.
that on our calendar and our list to do. And we've already talked with Mr. Hyder, who did the rate study. So he's well aware that we're planning to do
Okay.
this. Yeah. Yep.
thank you.
You're welcome.
okay.
We go to the work plan?
Finally, we have the 2025 work plan. I'll just point out some highlights that might be a little different from what you've seen in the past. So in February, we're going to come to you with some Goose Creek revisions for certain rates. And then down in August, we'll also have a renewal of our banking services, which hasn't happened in a couple of years. Everything else is pretty standard monthly. And then October, again, the budget right off of uncollectible accounts. And then we're done for the year before we know it. It'll be December.
Yeah.
That's our draft plan, certainly subject to change as things come up.
Hey,
That looks good.
That's all I had for today.
All right.
thank you.
Any questions? Charles is here. That, next meeting is February 26th, 8:00. And take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
We're done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenzie.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Bumpos.